Welcome. Welcome to the first Marketo user group of the year. So the next slide, So just a quick run through of today's agenda. We'll start with practical tips on how on the new email designer with Lily. Then Jay and Stephanie will cover the best practices and some of the current gaps, and we'll finish with highlights and announcement from Adobe Summit with Amy. So it should be a really useful session, especially if you're exploring or moving into the new email designer. And during the sessions, feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go, because Jeremy and Amy from Adobe, I believe they will be monitoring and responding there. And we'll also have Q&A during each session and at the end. So this is us, the Melbourne mock leader. For anyone who's new, I'm Cecilia, and I co-host the Melbourne mock alongside Minna, and very excited to have Harrison joining us as the new mock leader. Great to have you on board. And the next few slides, just housekeeping. So we just want, we want to keep this a non-promotional space and ask everyone to respect anything shared during the session. And the next slide is just a note that this session is being recorded. And I'll now hand over to Harrison to share a few updates.
Thanks, Cecilia. So just a couple of updates from Adobe here. First of all, the applications for the Marketo Champion program for 2026 are now open. So if you are interested, this is a really, really amazing professional development opportunity. So applications close on June 5th. So there's a QR code if you want to join. And for those of you who don't know what the Champion program is, Adobe are also hosting a webinar next Thursday to sort of cover off what the program is, what it involves, and whether you are a good candidate to apply. So if you did want to register for that, that is available too and coming up next week. Also, there are a lot of other Marketo user group chapters around the world who host events all the time. So we've included some of the upcoming virtual events here. So you can join those, watch them online or watch the recordings. Some really interesting sessions coming up, particularly with the announcements at Adobe Summit over the last couple of weeks, which have been really exciting news for Marketo. So they are available here if you want to register as well. And then as always, if you are in love with Marketo as much as we are, they would really love it if you gave them a review on G2 and Trust Radius with the opportunity to receive a little gift card as a thank you there. So I hand over to Minna to introduce our first speakers.
Thank you. So for today's lineup, first up we've got Lily Doyle. I've worked with Lily for quite a few years, and Lily was one of the few people that I knew that really had jumped into the email editor early on, had shared her insights with me, and was a great fit for today's talk. She'll be going into the pros and cons, some practical tips, and how to basically get going and use it within your organization. So without further ado, over to you, Lily.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me to speak. So I figured I'd kind of talk about how to implement it and scale it for your team, because that's kind of where my team is personally. So you can go to the next slide. I guess just a quick overview, what's new in the email designer. So you've got the ability to drag and drop stuff, which is exciting. AI assisted content, responsive preview. Like I noticed they just toggled on like light and dark mode, which was pretty fun. You can lock some templates and you can like build some things faster. Thank you. So I kind of created like this implementation roadmap, I guess. So just kind of like how I've been phasing in using it. First, I kind of did an audit of like what we were using in the previous email editor, just which ones we want to move over, which ones we kind of really needed to do a refresh on. And one thing I noticed too is that you can give certain people access to the new email designer, which is kind of nice in this stage. That way, like maybe people don't have access to it, that shouldn't at this stage when it's not like fully set up. Then we kind of design it. I've been collaborating with our design team, and they've been, you know, building the templates and some like customizable like buttons and the footers and all that fun stuff, and kind of creating a little branding guide for us in there. That way people can, you know, have the templates, but also a little freedom to, you know, play around within guidelines. And then the next part was just kind of piloting it with a small, like I have like two people that I'm going to start with to try to like use the templates first. That way they can say, this is kind of what's good, this is what's bad, or maybe we had a gap in like a module or something and they have a suggestion, which is always fun. And pending feedback, then, you know, we kind of bring it out to everybody, share the documentation with everybody. That's time to retire the old editor, thank it for all its work and service, and then hopefully just keep using the new email editor. And then you can go to the next one. And then I just kind of put together little pros and cons. So for me, the pros were drag and drop. You can even start from scratch if you're really technically savvy and like to design stuff. There's still the reusable modules. There's the live like mobile and desktop preview. There's the light and dark mode. You can have the template locking, which is nice, and more freedom to create versus the old one. You know, I think we all know how the other email editor was working. Sometimes you're like, I just have to work within these. So it's nice to be able to finally have some freedom. And then cons, I think it is still a little bit of a steeper learning curve. I think if people are used to one thing, you know, getting people to do new things is always its own challenge, I guess. There is some effort upfront, like especially if you just want to redesign your templates entirely or like moving them over, working with design. Some of the HTML stuff was a little bit hard. So like formatting wise, I noticed like there's certain like settings and they were kind of hard to find and not super intuitive for me at least. And just, I think the time up front, everything, you know, always takes time. And then I found how fragments were a little bit tricky for me to work with. So maybe someone later in the presentation has some tips on fragments, but that's the next slide. Yeah, so just kind of a little summary. I think taking an inventory of what you've got and what you want to move over to the new editor is a good place to start. Champions are your best investment with the templates. So if you can get one excited person on board, you're halfway there. Locking or like kind of keeping these things a little bit more standardized isn't restrictive. It's just able to let people create more things at faster scale and kind of keeps things consistent. And invest in training your team and creating videos and documentation. Use the sandbox if you can. I think for me, I've been creating a lot of videos and different types of content because people learn differently. So I've created videos. I've also created like screenshots with words. So words, instructions. So that's kind of my approach to it. So that's kind of my short but sweet on the email editor.
Thanks so much, Lily. For Q&A, I think if people can pop some questions in the general chat, we'll kind of pop back to them at the end. So if you have any questions or comments, please pop them in as we go. But thank you so much, Lily. And now we'll move over to Jay and Stephanie, who will be presenting together. We'll see some detailed information about comparing Email Editor 2.0 with Email Editor 3.0, and just getting some best practices and recommended approaches from them as well. So looking forward to jumping into this one today with you guys. Over to you.
Hello, I'm Jay, and forgive me, I thought I might get my camera working, but it's not. I'm on my laptop and it's asking me to restart my PC. So unfortunately, I tried to be on camera. For those that know me, I never go on camera, and I really tried this time to go on camera, but yeah. Anyway, so I've been using Marketo for quite a while, and I've been looking into the new email editor, email editor 3.0, for probably past 8 months now. And yeah, my partner in crime, Stephanie, we've been just trying to figure out everything about this. And yeah, we're going to talk about all the things that we've learnt and our recommendations for how you can deploy it in your organization. So over to you, Stephanie.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am on the platform operations team at Adobe. One of my remits is I own the entire email asset for our entire global marketing enterprise org. So I am in charge of our templates, our governance, basically making emails dance. Anything an email can do, I have to figure out how to support the team and make it happen. So this is very close to my heart as far as a tool that I am in all the time, 2.0 and 3.0. And it's up to me to figure out how we migrate our entire email library over to the new one. So some things that stick out as far as comparisons. You will find that with email 2.0, obviously, you know, I think what Lily said, it's been good to us, but it does not have the capability to pull in native AI features. And Adobe is focusing all of those features into the new email 3.0. So what you'll be able to do is have AI capabilities embedded inside the email editor for content and imagery generation, basically using Firefly or AI assistant to come up with content generation. With the 2.0, we had a connected parent template. So you had a parent template and child email, and anything you push to that parent template would be inherited by the child email. That is not the structure of the email editor 3.0. That structure instead lives within fragments, and the fragments get used inside the emails. And as you update fragments, those trickle down to emails that are still using an inherited fragment. So a big aha there could give you a new idea of using templates in a different strategic way, which I'll go over how we're going to do it towards the end. You're probably used to creating your templates using HTML and CSS code. Really, with this new editor, we're really promoting a drag and drop and an ease of use, hopefully a lower barrier to entry since you don't have to use as much code. I've been using the image to HTML converter. It's worked pretty well, but I know there's probably a couple more kinks that they're going to work out with it. But a ton of WYSIWYG and less overall HTML. You probably were sending your email samples to a rendering tool and then logging into that rendering tool and verifying the rendering accuracy. Now in email 3.0, Litmus is embedded inside, so you don't have to do that process anymore. Dynamic content, we all probably have worked with segmentations and all of the segments within them to create dynamic content manually for each one. Such a time suck. Now we can apply conditional content layering. What that means is think of something like a record that qualifies for a specific industry and the job title and, I don't know, location, let's say. You can now combine all three of those into your content instead of prior where you had to kind of use a segmentation and kind of decide in a waterfall feature what you would apply. So the hope is that we can get closer to that one-to-one scale. There was no collaboration in the email 2.0. Essentially, to collaborate, you probably worked out of, well, I work out of Workfront tickets, or maybe you would do Slacks, or maybe you would send the email to stakeholders and get feedback. We now have a collaboration tool inside the email. And so while you're looking at the email, there's a collaboration column to the right where you can tag people and say, how does this look directly in the email? And then the roles and permissions are slightly different. you likely kept your templates locked away from the rest of the marketing team. In this instance, they'll have access to the templates, but you'll most likely be locking down fragments and themes, and then giving them access to the majority of other areas. So the whole goal of this new email editor is really to save time. The idea of content creation, maybe taking you away from code a little bit more. Essentially, once you have those fragments built, you should be 90% of the way there with your email formatting anyway. Given that, the hope is maybe you'll have to reduce your reliance on external resources, and maybe you don't need so much support creating your templates and managing them. And with the conditional content layering, you could deliver better email experiences and really try to get that relatable content to the right people. A couple things that we noticed in working with the tool: there is no autosave yet. I just heard recently that we're going to have a push sometime in June, I believe, where they will have baked in autosave. So fingers crossed, but if you are using this tool today, you are going to want to make sure to hit that save button multiple times. And I think the reason, Jay, you kind of knew a lot more about this, but the reason they didn't initially bake it in is because it can slow down the build process. And so they just thought, well, let's make it faster and have a better experience. But we pushed back and said, no, we would like our autosave feature. So please bring that back. So they have worked hard to get that back for us.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. So just to, sorry, if you go back to what I was going to say, was that in email editor 2.0, so every time, it's a bit more technical, every time you made an action, the back end kind of saved the current state of your email in the server. So it was sending like HTTP requests to Marketo server all the time. And so that's why like sometimes the editor 2.0 bugged out. Like when you tried to do lots of things at the same time, it was sending all those requests at the time, and it just bugged out sometimes. In this one, they kind of like thought, well, we just want a very responsive WYSIWYG editor, and they probably didn't consider it at all. But yeah, we were pushing for them to add it back in because I think it's pretty important. Initially, like 8 months ago when we started first using it, like they didn't have, when you could have accidentally closed the tab and there was no pop-up alert saying, hey, you've got unsaved changes. But now at least they've got that. But yeah, now they're moving towards some kind of autosave ability. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but yeah, looking forward to it.
All right, so we're going to see a shift in governance. I kind of touched on this earlier. We're used to having a template and all of our guardrails really lying within that template and the way that we structured the modules. We're going to shift away from that and use our governance within the fragments. The key here is a fragment with inheritance, but also with the ability to break inheritance. So I really want to focus on this one point because I think I struggled with that part the most while trying to figure out how to roll this out to the entire team. When we took our modules and we basically created them into fragments, the whole goal was to get the fragment as close to what the marketer would need as possible so that they wouldn't need to do too much. They could add the content, they could upload the image, and basically be done. There were some nuances where they maybe needed access to do things like perhaps it had a hard time doing rich text in some areas. So we would have to break the inheritance of the fragment in order to apply rich text. When you break inheritance, there is no more connection from a parent fragment to a child email. So when the team would break them, if I go to update the fragment, it's not going to trickle down into that email. Totally fine for a one-off batch and blast, but not really recommended for any of our evergreen nurture emails. Fun fact, we have 460 nurture emails that I get to migrate. Themes available at the email level. This is really going to allow you, at least for us, we have multiple themes. So it'll allow you to really apply your brand standards in your guidelines. But you can have multiple. There's more than one theme that you can have in a dropdown, and the marketers just need to be enabled to understand what each theme is used for. For us at Adobe, we have a standard Adobe theme, but then we do little special tweaks for Summit emails, and we have some special tweaks for Adobe Max that my team also supports. So we have a couple of themes to really support that. And then Jay, do you want to touch on that last one?
The custom CSS, yes. So there's the ability to add custom CSS to the email template or to an email asset. And this is kind of on parity with the old email editor, except, and probably a very important thing, and I think we also cover it later on, is except that any changes you make to the custom CSS that you've added to your template doesn't flow through to your emails that were built using the template, unfortunately. There's, I guess, a couple of things that the product team can do, because this is important. Like if your brand currently changes, like everything throughout your email uses a different font, maybe you could update that in the custom CSS, and then it'll flow through to everything, like every single email using it. Well, yeah, unfortunately, if you change custom CSS, it doesn't flow through. But there's ideas that we can apply. So we're talking to the product team to see if we can have like custom CSS added to fragments, because fragments, like everything inside a fragment does flow through and get inherited. So that's one idea, or they can just make it, like flow through from the template at the template level. But yeah, I'm pushing for that change, but yeah, it's still, we don't know if it's going to be done anyway. All right, moving on. So this is just an example of the theme that I've set up in our sandbox. One key thing that I wanted to mention here, and it gets a bit more technical as well, is that you'll see in the most right screenshot, there's no like padding or margin between anything. And that is because we're building everything with fragments. So fragments they're supposed to be like your modules. But the way that the fragments are being added to the email is that you have to put a structure into the email that you're building, and then you put the fragment into that structure. So the structure is like, it's got a column or something. But then when you build a fragment, it's also built with a structure. So then you've got a column or a structure inside of a structure. And so when you set padding for themes, you get double the padding in the email that you're building. So that's why I don't have any padding or any margins in my theme. And then I manually configure the padding for the structures inside the fragments that I'm building. So in the column or something. So then in the email, it's got 0, but then in the fragment, when you move it in, it's manually coded. Then it's just that one set of like spacing and padding. I hope I haven't lost anyone, but yeah, feel free to ask me questions later on. But yeah, that's what I found, where if I put the padding into the theme, then it gets doubled up. That's the too long didn't read version of it. Yeah. Sending sample email. So yeah, this took me a while to figure out at the start, but yeah, simulate content equals send sample. And there's 3 things that you need to be aware of if you're just getting into the new email design. So you have to type in the full email address. So there's no type ahead search coming from the old email editor, when you go into preview, and then you can just start typing an email address, it will just give you a list of results. Well, unfortunately, that's not available right now. And there's no pick list of the previous email addresses. So yeah, for people who are sending like samples to Litmus or email on Acid, just have that the previous email address handy. And then also the inability to send a default email. So what that means is that you have to pick a record from the database to preview the email in. Like, you can't send the email without a record to preview it with, which is a little bit annoying, but these aren't do or die things. These are things that I guess we can learn to live with. Yeah, so those are the send sample callouts. The advanced email editor. So recently they added this, and I couldn't find any guides or docs. I mean, there's docs on the feature, but there's no docs or guides on how to use it. So things like syntax or any other nuanced callouts. So we still haven't found those yet. Hopefully they'll get added. But alternatively, what you can do is you can build a template using fragments and components. You can then view it in the advanced HTML editor, and then you can, if you're interested, you can reverse engineer that syntax. So they use lots of curly brackets and stuff, and I've tried this with a HTML component. So the same thing can be done with the HTML components that you add to a normal email. And I've built, so the thing with HTML components is if it contains links or if it contains images, the new email editor can automatically pick it up, and you get, like, on the right-hand side, you get these options to kind of like the variables in the email editor 2.0, where you can just put in the link button CTA text or button link, and then you can put in like the image source. But then any normal text, like in a div or a p tag, it doesn't pick up. And so what I did was I took the same structure for the syntax and then just tweaked a little bit, just put in like random UUIDs and stuff. And you can actually put that into your HTML component and it'll work. So yeah, so you can reverse engineer the syntax and put it into your own custom HTML component, save it as a fragment or something, and then you can use that fragment. The only gotcha is if you break inheritance, and maybe this is because I haven't figured out the exact format or structure that the WYSIWYG editor likes. So if you break inheritance, there is something called compatibility mode. And I think this also applies to when you import HTML. The imported HTML email is available for editing in something called compatibility mode, which means you don't have the ability to add any structures. You don't have the ability to add any fragments or components. It's just basic email editing. Like, you can't really change the structure from there on. So that's probably just one thing that I still need to figure out. And if I do figure out, I'll share it with everyone. But yeah, that's the advanced email. Oh, so public service announcement. So just one thing that everyone's aware of. In 3.0, the mobile view breakpoint is set at 500 pixels. So in our old email editor 2.0 template, I think we had like 2 breakpoints. So one at 600 pixels and then one at 480 pixels. So, I mean, that was the power of writing everything yourself, where you could, dictate when you wanted the desktop view to go into mobile view, and then, maybe you have multiple versions of the mobile view. But in the new email editor, it's just set at 500 pixels. But maybe with the advanced HTML editor, you can play around with it and get what you want. Cool. Recommended approach. So I'll start this off and say that, yes, using fragments and themes is definitely the right way to go. And even before then, I'll just canvas saying that I think the old email editor versus the new email editor, the new email editor is able to do probably 95% of everything that you need. So yeah, like give it a try. You just need to know all of these things and be able to set it up properly. But definitely efficiency and reusability is a plus with the fragments and themes. So try to replicate your modules as fragments. There is the template migration tool, so when you go into the new email editor and you press create template, and then you can select from like my templates or the default out of the box templates, and then there's also I think email editor 2.0 templates. I don't know what the tab is called, but basically it'll take your email editor 2.0 template and then it'll like migrate it or import it into the email editor 3.0. And then from there, you can save your fragments, like save the modules that's being converted into structures. So you can save the structures as fragments. And then that's a quick way to do it. We did it from scratch. We built everything from scratch because there are some gotchas with using the template migration feature. So one of them is that if you have variables in your old email editor 2.0 template, they don't get carried over, obviously. So we had like modules that where we had sections which we could toggle using the Boolean variables. So, buttons and titles or images, we could toggle them using variables. And so when we tried migrating using the tool, like those things, because some of them were by default off, we couldn't see them anymore. And so we had to rebuild our fragments, rebuild our modules as fragments. And we probably had to increase the number of fragments because, we didn't have that variables to work with. So for example, if you had a left image, right text kind of module, and you had a variable that could switch the image to the right side and text to the left side, well, you have to build 2 fragments now because you don't have that variable feature anymore. Also, the thing about using the migration tool is that it does carry over all of the CSS from your old template, but that means that you have to use that template for every email build, because if you try to use the fragments that you migrated from the old email editor 2.0 module in a template that doesn't have the necessary CSS classes, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to render properly. So once you've migrated your template from email editor 2.0, clean it up. Like once you've saved all of the stuff that you need as fragments, clean it up because it migrates with all of the fragments visible, all of the modules visible. So clean it up to be like the most basic version that you need, and then save that as the template that you'll use ongoing. So that's one way to do it. And then the template that gets migrated, it doesn't have a theme, but you can create a theme with it to use with it. So there's like a generate theme from this template feature. I found that to be a bit hit and miss. It didn't work on the template that I migrated. So I guess it probably depends on how complex your CSS classes are, your style sheet is. Anyway, so yeah, the one that you migrate after it's been migrated, it doesn't have that themes available. So you probably have to create one yourself. Right, use a naming convention for fragments, just like how really helpful your program naming conventions are. Use it, come up with something for fragments and your templates, because if your fragments are being put into templates that don't have the necessary custom CSS, you know, they're not going to render properly. So yeah, it's kind of for those reasons where, you know, you might name all of your fragments aligned to one template. Like we call ours the main template. So all of our fragments are prefixed with main. And then a fragment which uses themes can't be used with a template that doesn't use themes, so they don't mix and match. And so we, you know, append th for theme after, you know, everything that you can use a theme. So, you know, those small things, you know, just chuck them into your naming convention, which is very helpful as well. And yeah, HTML component and custom CSS, we touched on this a little bit previously, but like there were modules from our old template that just couldn't be replicated in the new email designer using out of the box features. Like we had to use the HTML component and custom CSS. So an example was we had a row of logos, and all of those logos were fixed width and height, so like 100 by 100 pixels. But then any logo that you put inside that container would always be vertically centered and horizontally centered, and it wouldn't stretch the container. And so we built that using HTML and custom CSS in the old email editor, and so we had to repeat that in the new email editor. So it's good that you can do it, but yeah, you still have to use the HTML component and custom CSS to do it. You can't, unfortunately, you just wouldn't be able to do that using like the structures and components and stuff. Yeah, known issues. So ghost containers, this is an interesting one, and it goes back to the issue where a fragment is built using a structure, right? And then you put it into the email and you have to put it into another structure. And if you break inheritance and you decide to rearrange stuff or delete stuff, basically what happens is you're no longer able to click on the structure inside the fragment. You can only click on the structure that's part of the email. And so yeah, if you had padding around the fragment, which we do have, then that padding is kind of just there. Like you can't delete it unless you delete the whole structure from the email. And so to remove it, you have to isolate it in its own structure, which is likely you have to move everything out of the structure in the email so that it's the only thing left in that structure, and then you've got to delete that structure. And I think I've got a recording. Hopefully it plays in the next slide. No, does it? No. Okay, maybe try go into the link. Wonder if that works. And while waiting for that, so yeah, this is one of the reasons why we're trying to avoid, you know, breaking inheritance as much as possible. And I know right now it's very difficult that because you can't put rich text in there, like you have to break inheritance to put a link or bullet points into a editable text area. Like if you have a text which you've configured in a fragment to be enable edition, unfortunately you have to break inheritance to put like links or a bullets in there. Yeah, so this is
until June.
There's a video. Right, yes, there is likely a fix coming for the rich text thing. So yeah, you don't have to delete it. I mean, you could be moving those things out of it, but basically what you end up with is, you know, these two columns inside the fragment which you can't click on. When you try to select the column, you can only select the column from the email, which is the single one, the single structure. I think that's it, yeah. And then yeah, you have to get rid of that whole structure to be able to remove all of that excess padding. Cool. Custom CSS updates to the template. This we've touched on. It's basically just reiterating that any code that you add or custom CSS code that you change to the template doesn't propagate to email assets that have been built with the template. So yeah, one of the things that we've suggested is to allow fragments, is to allow custom CSS in fragments. And then that way, it also makes sense to me because like if you've got a really complex module, you would build the custom CSS for that module, specifically for that module, and it's all contained in one fragment. And that way, regardless of which template you put the fragment into, it'll just render properly, right? So that's probably my reasoning for pushing for this. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. This is an interesting one where it's how I call it tainting the CSS. Basically, if you've got if you don't have themes or if you've unlocked themes, unlocked component styles, so anything that you tweak on the right-hand side, like padding, color, font size, I call can taint the CSS. So styles for desktop are added inline, and then styles for mobile are added in a head tag, in the head, in a style tag. And then once you tweak it, it basically gets recorded, it gets saved. And even if you change it back to the original value, and yeah, there's still a line there. So try to use undo if possible instead of reverting it. And I guess just try to set up your theme initially. Try to set up your theme so that it can cover everything that you need. And yeah, so this is lack of variables. Email Editor 2.0 had all of these things which you're aware of. You could put in like number variables or color variables even. The pick lists were super helpful, and then the booleans were really cool as well. But basically what that means in here is that you're probably going to have to build more fragments to match the type of flexibility that you have or robustness that you had with the old email editor. So like instead of having a left-right toggle, you have to build two modules, which has both everything built out. And then if you had a pick list for picking a logo, maybe you'll have to just let people choose a logo from Design Studio now on. Right, so this is another fun one. So the slider for choosing the right width of the columns is only percentage based, and like I can't put in a specific amount of pixels. But what I did find out is that you can work around it. So press F12 to go into Inspector, or right click to go into Inspector, and then you select the element, one of the columns, and then you'll see the widths. It's like, I think I had there 28.333% or something like that. And you can edit those directly in the inspector, and then you'll be able to get the widths, exact widths that you want. All right, over to you, Stephanie.
Okay, so with all of this, the approach that I'm planning to take with the team is to first leverage more templates. Now that I don't need to apply governance as much as I did before, where we had a parent-child relationship, I can create maybe 10 to 12 templates that gets the team closer to the finished email from the start. I know that this is going to be a very difficult move. If anyone has tried to use this email editor and you get frustrated, that's like all of us. So don't feel bad. By doing this approach, I'm really trying to ease that burden of my campaign operations team. So that's the hope, that I can create more templates for them to use. The one we probably use the most is our webinar emails. All have the exact same format. So it's a great example of, we'll have a webinar template specifically. We might also have a summit template to leverage, because a lot of those have the same kind of recipe. So more templates to get the team closer so they don't have to do as much design. Really going to be doing some enablement with the team to understand the difference between inheritance and breaking inheritance, what the consequences are, and to make sure when they're doing that they understand what's going to happen. Once you break, you can't go back. So really encouraging them to not use any broken inheritance with any evergreen nurture emails. If they do it with their one-off email blasts, just to understand it's sort of a last resort. Do everything you can within inheritance, because you can't go back once you break it. We are leveraging themes. We have multiple themes. We have an overall Adobe branded theme, and then we have some additional themes that allow for some different font weights and other things that we can't do directly into the fragment. And then obviously placing governance everywhere I can. I still think that there's not enough governance wrapped up within this email 3.0, but it does exist in a lot of different areas. For example, we can lock down the ability for users to see our fragments. With 2.0, we actually would build our templates in a totally different workspace and share them to the workspace that the team would see. So it would be locked. But with fragments, they all have to be built in the same workspace. And so you have the ability to kind of restrict who can see them and use them. So we're going to be using that. You also have the ability to lock content. So maybe think of some areas like your footer, for example. That's another area of governance where it's not all in the same spot. It's in various areas of the tool. And then I have some resources here. I'm going to put this in the chat. So Joe Stewart did a 20-minute session on the Email Designer at Summit, and I put the link to it here. It's a great presentation. It's very dense. A lot of the stuff in here that we have in our slides, he did and explained it in that presentation as well. So I really encourage you to check that out. And then I put his LinkedIn on here so that you can follow him, because he does post about the email editor 3.0. And by following him, you might get, some more insights into updates or how to use the tool. He's just a really great resource. Okay, fire away. We may have answered all of them in the chat, I think.
Yeah, there has been a very active chat, and I think most have been answered. I think I saw a couple that may not have answers yet. We had one from Stefan. For those who use AEM, is the use of fragments similar? Not sure if anyone here has an answer for that one.
Is that referring to Adobe B2B, I wonder?
He said AEM, and that's
Okay.
assets, which I don't actually go into that often.
We'll find out and get back to him.
Come back. Okay, cool. I think mostly these are done. Are fragments the equivalent of using segmentation for dynamic content? But that's conditional content, and we've talked about fragments more being similar to modules. Let's see another chat. There was an interesting comment as well by Paul about being able to actually add in an editable sidebar so that you can put in editable variables using handlebars. I thought that was an interesting one. I don't know if you want to chime in, Paul, and give us a bit more on that. Not actually sure. You can unmute. Do we know, Cecilia? Participants able to unmute on this?
I'm not too sure. Hold on, let me see.
That's fine. I think in the meantime, while Cecilia checks it out, one from me is what would your recommendation be in terms of rolling it out? I know that you guys were kind of saying at Adobe, you've slowly rolled it out across all different verticals. Do you start with one area and slowly move into all of the things, or is it a big swap over at once?
Yeah. So the way I'm thinking of it is I'm really trying to find out what type of email do we send the most frequently. That's also fairly simple. And that's our webinar invites that we send out. The thing that I'm keeping in mind is not only are we migrating emails and doing that whole motion, but we're also enabling the team on a brand new tool that they have not even looked at. So it's likely possible I'm going to be making videos and creating a learning path for the team, having them take that learning path and then start the one-on-one training. Just to kind of get them familiar with the layout, what all the sections are, what is a fragment, what does that mean? I imagine we will start with the North America first, focusing on webinar email builds. I will have a template that is close to the webinar email as possible, and that will get them used to the tool without having to do too many tricks to make the emails dance, right? So that's the goal, is to really try something simple and start with the regional teams to keep the groups small. There are going to be a ton of questions. There's going to be confusion. That's just to be expected. This is a totally different environment. It's a totally different tool as far as layout. And it's not your Marketo, 2.0. It is completely new. But there's so many pros to moving to it, including AI. And it's, right now we don't trust it enough to build our content, but it's coming. And so we want to at least have that capability for the teams to be able to leverage that as they need. There also is going to be, I believe, some sort of integration with Gen Studio. And so being able to pull, I might have to confirm that, but being able to pull from AEM some of the Gen Studio components, possibly. We might want to all check me on that to make sure I'm accurate. But the whole point being, like, there's going to be a lot of integrations with this, where we just were not able to do that with 2.0 based on the way that it was structured when Marketo was first built. So
yeah. Cool. There's one that popped up from V. Is there any truth to the rumor that Adobe will be?
Oh, thank you. I knew there was something I want to touch on. Yes, but don't worry. I pushed back, and I'm talking to the adoption marketing team next week, actually. Adoption marketing. And they have actually taken away a date completely. First, it was 2026. I screamed and yelled and said, no way, Jose. Even, like, there's no way, zero chance. I will not be able to make it this year. Then they said 2027, and that was okay, a little bit better, but still getting a little dicey. So I'm pushing for, please wait until 2028 if you can. All that to say, your emails will still send. Sorry, I've got it. Okay. Your emails will still send. You just at some point might not be able to edit them. That's what I heard from our side. So
thanks so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We'll move on now to Amy for an Adobe Summit wrap up. Thank you so much, Jay and Stephanie. That was awesome. So good to see so many real insights. And over to you, Amy.
Hey, Minna, I was actually going to say, I think we've only got 2 minutes left. So and I do have a hard stop, unfortunately. But what I thought we could do is there is a great sizzle reel to share from Summit. And then I know there are other mugs that are wanting a roadmap session and an update or a download from Summit. So I thought maybe we propose, instead of doing individual cities, maybe we bridge it together and go do a virtual for ANZ with a download from Summit so that everyone can get it at once. Because I can promise you I can't do it in 2 minutes. Because there is a lot to go through. So let me just show the sizzle reel, and then we'll take that as an action item if that's okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
No worries. Hold on. Let me just share my screen. Because at least I feel like this will get everyone very excited around what's coming if they haven't heard what is coming. Oh, wait, hold on. Stop sharing. I think I've got to do the tab. Oh, I can only do, I can't, you won't get the music, damn it. But anyways, we'll see how we go.
Someone can sing.
Yeah, exactly. Music's a bit, right? So hopefully you heard some of the music that came through, but I think, you know, one of the things I would put there is when I'm taking this roadmap to current customers on one-on-ones, like some of the things that they're saying is like, oh, that lead investigation out of the box agent. I wish I had that last week because I literally spent 10 hours like investigating why this wasn't working or this lead didn't qualify for a particular program, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the things that we're creating is to really help drive productivity, insights a lot faster and a lot quicker through a conversational interface that everyone will get. It's not an add-on, this conversational UI, which is great. And the new UI, I don't know if anyone's seen it come into their instance yet, but we do have a refreshed UI for the normal Marketo Engage, which is very exciting. So that's going to feel a lot more modern, a lot more fresh, look a lot prettier, for lack of a better word. I'm calling it basically a facelift. But we're really bringing Marketo Engage into the era of AI with pre-built agents that you'll be able to access through the conversational UI. But like I mentioned, there is a lot of detail to go through. I will take this offline with the team and set a call that everyone can get involved, and we can go through some demos as well and really dive into the detail around it. So yeah, the only other thing is, Harrison, I know you're excited to hear about it. I'll include that in the next session too, but please, I'll make sure that you've got all the information that you can, deep dive into it yourself, but always nice to have a product manager or a PMM dive into it in more detail too. So let me take it offline.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy, for that, and appreciate everyone coming on today. We've had so much interest in this topic, and we'll be sure to send out a recording post-session and possibly some follow-up as well in terms of where to from here, because it just seems like it's really resonated with a lot of people. So thank you, everyone, for getting involved in the discussion. And yeah, looking forward to the next one as well, Amy, so that we can get the full wrap-up. Thanks so much.
We'll organise that.
Thank you, guys. And I wanted to say that. And yeah, we have next Melbourne Mark lined up. It will be in July, and it will be in person as well. So stay tuned. When we'll invite you again, Amy, I guess, to cover the topic that we haven't covered today.
No worries.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.